Welcome back to BVarsity Live inside the Dignity Health Studio. Zach Ewing and Louis Amisoy are with you, and joined now on the phone for a little high school football roundtable, Andy Boogard of the Fresno Bee. Andy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Doing?
Doing well.
To dry out. We got some water up here.
What?
Down there.
What?
Oh yeah.
How did that happen?
I don't understand. You know, when the water falls out of the sky,
what are you
I
talking
look
about?
around like the gods are angry or something. I don't know what's going on.
Hey, the only time the ground is wet here is when they oil the streets. You know, that's the only time it's wet here.
Yeah. No, we get dust here instead of rain, so
Yeah.
we're jealous of that. Andy, I know you were out of town last weekend. I'm sure you've had a chance to kind of pore over the football brackets. What were your initial impressions of seeding? Did the committee really miss anywhere in your eyes?
Well, I don't think so. The Kern Valley, I suppose, I think they almost admit they made a mistake there, but elsewhere it looked pretty clean to me. Zach, there was some tough calls there. Particularly it was going to be really interesting with the Ridgeview and Lemoore, and that's okay. And then, right at the top with Edison and Liberty, and then the 3-4 with Clovis North and Bakersfield. But I thought it played out pretty true, and I've seen your material, which is awesome as usual, and your follow-up, and it's interesting on the seeding. I've long been an advocate, Zach, for the common sense criteria. I've pushed for that. They have the, 1, 2, 3, like 6 criteria if there's a tiebreaker. Well,
right.
I've always said I think they should have 7. One's a common sense. But I thought this one, I thought it played out pretty true, and I think you support that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in a lot of cases they almost got lucky that the tiebreaker worked out the way it did. The exception being that Kern Valley Farmersville, in which, as we found out a few days later, they actually applied the tiebreaker incorrectly because they missed a game. But it's kind of a silly system, but it did work this year. And I think if we look at D1, I think most people would agree those 4 top seeds, the teams that have the byes this week, are a leg above everybody else. And I don't know that it will definitely play out that way. We could see an upset next week in the quarters, but it looks like that's your Final Four right now, doesn't it?
It does, but the team that intrigues me, Zach, and haven't seen them a couple times, is Bullard. We have a couple programs up here. Well, Central, Bullard, Clovis, where they had it would be their sophomore class this year. Are very, very powerful classes. So their best years are the next couple of years. But Bullard starts 15, 16 underclassmen every game. But they have a great running back in Charles Williams. They have some really good athletes, and a sophomore quarterback, which is Jack Taylor, which is always a difficult thing, or it can be difficult in the playoffs. But I just think that's a team, the way they operate, they run downhill. If it gets wet like it is right now, even though it's not supposed to be tomorrow, that's a team that can play in those kind of conditions, which proved out last week at Sanger when they came back and won the game in the last minute in absolute monsoon conditions, even though they actually threw a couple passes there. But I just think, Zach, that I think that the parity factor is there in D1 this year. I'm still spoiled, I'm sure you are, by the Drillers last year. I was in awe by that team. So we just don't have that, and, we may not have that for another 30 years. So I just think they are capable. Bullard is capable of picking someone, but they got to be careful for Buchanan this week. It's a trap game.
I was going to ask you about that.
Oh yeah, and I'm big on trap games. I mean, there's validity to that, no doubt. Coming off the emotional Edison game and with maybe peeking ahead, to Bakersfield next week, and Buchanan played Clovis North very tough. Now, my first instinct to that, last week was that doesn't reflect very well on Clovis North. And maybe I've had them, overrated all along. But one big thing there is that they definitely will not have they had this cornerback and receiver Norua Obanar, who broke his neck, he fractured a vertebrae, a couple of months ago, and he's definitely not going to come back. There was some hope that he would, but even though I can't imagine that, and you have children, Zach, I can't imagine as a parent ever put a kid in that situation, in the same season where he fractured a vertebrae. But anyway, he's out, and he's a big player for Clovis North, Zach. He really is. He's in that Kevin Hayes ilk. He's not a Kevin Hayes, but he's very good. He had that, that kind of impact two-way guy, but they're not going to have him. And he was a real good receiver as well. When you have a guy like Bolu, Olarin Funme, who can run like that, and then you have that threat outside. But the fact is, he's not there. He's not coming back. So that's really, I think, going to hurt. Clovis North, are they? But anyway, to answer your question, I think I would throw Bullard in that equation, and I'm not sure that I would with Clovis as the 5. But I just think you asked about the 4, and I just don't think that Bullard's that far behind those 4 that you mentioned.
Hey, do you think, Andy, that that Division II might be as compelling as Division I? I mean, with the Lemoore and Ridgeview. I mean, we've seen a lot of Ridgeview here. I mean, they're very impressive, and I think they could probably make a run in Division I this year. What are your thoughts on the differences between D1 and D2 this year?
Well, I think it's proven out that there's not that much separation. When you had a Sanger beating an Edison, and that's a team that I wish I could have seen. Wish I had the opportunity to see Ridgeview. I see your guys' video, which is unlike any other. It's awesome what you do down there. Maybe they're a cut above, and maybe that's going to play out, and maybe Ridgeview just run the table and roll this thing in D2. But the team that really, really intrigues me. Well, the whole division has intrigued me all along, Lewis, and it's deep. It's good. I can't get a real good read on Dinuba. They got beat really bad by Hanford, but
right.
That's another team. But the team that really intrigues me is Sanger. Throw out the first one to Redwood. 130 yards in penalties, and they wet the bed. And I mean, so you throw that out. Fact is, they had Lemoore beat. They had Bullard beat. They had them both beat late, and some long passes right at the end beat. So Sanger's right there. That's a really good Sanger team. It's a typical, a Sanger team. Not a lot of size, but they're very fast across the board. Have a big, tall quarterback, and so I mean, they're right there. They can, they're going to be there. I see them beating Memorial again next week, and that's going to be a big semifinal, I believe, with Ridgeview and Sanger. Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean,
you look at that.
Walk out in the field. Yeah,
Andy. I mean, just to speak to the depth of it, I mean, Ridgeview could face Tulare Union. That's one heck of an 8 seed to have to play in the quarterfinals. And then if they were able to survive Tulare Union, then they would possibly get Sanger in a good semi, and then it would be Dinuba and Lemoore on the other side if those teams survive. The lower divisions, obviously, Hanford was 9-0 going into next week, and you have Liberty Madera at 10-0 in Division 4, and Kern Valley 10-0. Is there a storyline that sticks out to you in the when you go Divisions 3 or below?
Well, I love the potential I have back in August. The potential Liberty CBC game. I mean that's a game where I'm sure you've had the situation too. You and down there where given the D1, D2 is going to have to be just right. I mean, that's a game where I wish we were doing the basketball and I could do the baseball there, where we could see all 6 games in one weekend and be there. That's just a game I would really like to see. The Liberty game, Liberty Madera Ranchos, is legit, Zach. And I went up and I tried to get around and take a peek at these teams, and I did. I went up there and saw them against Sierra, and I counted. I went to that game not so much interested in the final score, Liberty Madera Ranchos. I wanted to get a real good look. I wanted to see how many of these players could play for Bakersfield, how many of these players could start for Clovis North and Bullard and Edison, and I counted 6 or 7. It's a very good Madera Ranchos team. So that's a game that to me really is really compelling down the road.
And you look at a team like CVC and what they've done to Bakersfield Christian for one. I mean, and that's obviously a very, very good team. And then Cesar Chavez, throw them out there. Maybe the surprise of the section is the number 3 seed in Division 4. What a defense that team had. I mean, they haven't given up 24 points to anybody all season long, and I think they had 3 shutouts in league play in a pretty good league. And who knows if CVC and Chavez will anybody even score if those teams play.
Yeah, really interesting storyline there. See, Casey Quinn goes down there, and he was up here. He was a Clovis West assistant, and he goes to Central, and he kind of got flushed, and where'd he go? And then all of a sudden, boom, there's, a guy, he's had an impact. May had an obvious impact, So,
and he knew he had some guys coming back too, but that blew me away that they would be 9-1 with a win over Bakersfield Christian and a league championship. So. State bowls, I mean, it seems like, maybe the section gets shut out. I know it's all complicated and who knows how anything will figure it out, but I don't even know that there's a team that you look at and say, even if they run to the title, they're for sure in, like there was last year. Yeah,
and, if Ridgeview rolls this thing and we know they're at 6 right now, for sure 2 or 3 people above them are going to lose. So that's a team that kind of, I think has our section's best shot, and has the ability to compete at that level once they get there. But it's going to take the right dominoes to fall. on top of them. So,
Hey, state
I think that's the only one.
state bowls, keep them or get rid of them. I mean, is that something? What do you think about that idea? I mean, there's even a talk now, I think, coming out of the southern section that do 13 bowl games.
That's going to happen.
From what I've
heard, that's almost a given.
Oh yeah, no, that's going to push through. The football advisory committee had no problem going through there. It had no problem go through the 10 section commissioners, and now it's going to go through the Federated Council in January. No, they'll pass that through. They have seen, guys, that they've seen that the bowls, whomever, wherever, have created interest, and this way that if you're a section champion, you're going to get in. Although it gets a little complicated. We won't get into it now, but I'm sure you guys know if you have an open division deal where someone, a section champion, could actually get bumped out. But, you have, 20, 24 games, 25 bowls, right off the bat. Well, there's 51 section champions in the state. But, that'll create interest. Plus, it'll allow, teams to stay home, for those regional championships to the north and to the south. And what's real interesting with our section is they got to balance it out. I think there's, 28 sections in the south, 23 in the north, something like that. But there's, of course, a lot more players and students, to the south. So our D1, 3, and 5 will actually go to the north. And that's really interesting because, our Chris Sloan, those guys, still pushing to get our section into the north permanently across the board in all sports. I don't know how you guys feel about that in Bakersfield. It may be a little different here because of geography. But they think that may play out in the long range and help the central section go to the north permanently. So, but anyway, Louis, to answer your question, it does create interest. It affects the smaller schools that share their athletes more. The tiny schools because that's one more week that they won't get to play basketball or wrestling or whatever. So there's some opposition there, but that is really your only opposition. There's some questions about, okay, now teams are going to play 15, 16 games, more up, the safety deal and all that. But, well, they're laying that on the laps of the coaches and their judgment and how much hitting and contact and all that deal. So those are really the only two issues.
I certainly think it helps. What's interesting, too, just as an aside, is that, Comcast and Time Warner are moving towards a merger, and it certainly would create interest, I think, beyond part of the problem was that Time Warner is not all over the state, which was doing the bowl games last year. If you look at the attendance for the bowl games, it was pretty solid attendance. Over those 2 nights, and if you expand it even further, I mean, you're going to see some really nice probably TV numbers as well, and I think they're seeing that. I saw some ESPN numbers on it was St. John Bosco and Bishop Gorman. I mean, they had some pretty good ratings for those things. So it's going to be interesting to see how those things work out. Yeah,
financially, I think it's proven to be lucrative, or not lucrative, at least they've made money. Yep. We'll say that when they started in 2006. So from that standpoint, it's worked.
Yep. Well, Andy, we're out of time, but thanks, man, for joining us. We always appreciate picking your brain. You've been around as long as anybody and know more than anybody. So we appreciate it.
I learned by reading the Bible in Bakersfield, California, and that's what I do. At 59 years old, I know better. So
what you've learned is to butter people up, I guess, too. So, well, thanks, Andy. We appreciate it, man. We'll see you. Okay. We'll see you around.
All right.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, that's Andy Boogard of the Fresno Bee. This is BVarsity Live. We're going to be back with Josh Sanchez of Nissan of Bakersfield next here in the Dignity Health Studios.